The morning started like any other for Steve Harvey, early, loud, and a little chaotic. His assistant, Tammy, had already texted him twice by 7 a.m., reminding him of his schedule, outfit choices, and that he needed to eat something other than a protein shake for breakfast. Steve, she warned in her usual no-nonsense tone when he finally called her back, "You keep skipping real meals, and I swear your suit pants going to be hanging off you like prayer cloths. Eat, or I'll bring you oatmeal myself." Steve chuckled. "I hear you, Mama Bear. Give me a sausage biscuit and some black coffee. We'll call it even. Don't play with me." The driver was waiting outside his Beverly Hills home by 7:30, and by 8:15 he was pulling into the studio lot. It was a beautiful California day, warm but breezy, with just enough clouds to keep the sun from feeling like an interrogation lamp. Steve adjusted his hat, stepped out of the SUV, and immediately got hit with the sounds of production crews, studio staff, and the muffled echoes of rehearsals from adjacent sound stages. The familiar scent of makeup powder and set lights filled his nose as he walked through the doors. After so many years in the game, the studio had become almost like a second home. A dysfunctional one, sure, but home all the same. As he passed by, various crew members gave him the usual greetings. "Morning, Mr. Harvey. Looking sharp today, Steve. Hey, that mustache still insured?" He threw back finger guns and classic Steve Harvey one-liners as he moved through the hallway. "You better act like you got some sense today, Keith. Only thing sharper than this suit is my barber's edge up. I wish this mustache was insured. State Farm turned me down." Everyone laughed. That was the thing about Steve. He didn't just run a show. He ran a vibe. From the set painters to the executive producers, everybody felt the ripple effect of his energy. But today, underneath the jokes, Steve felt a little off. He couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maybe it was just fatigue. The schedule was grueling. 3 shows today back-to-back, plus a podcast appearance later in the evening. Maybe he was just getting older. Or maybe he thought with a sigh as he adjusted his tie in the dressing room mirror, he was tired of always being on. He sat down for makeup while his longtime stylist, Dee, buzzed around him like a wasp with a curling iron. "You didn't sleep last night, did you?" she said, not even asking, just stating. Steve squinted. "Do I look tired?" "You look introspective. That's even worse." Steve laughed. "I'm just thinking, that's all." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, stop that. Nobody likes a thinking man with a mustache that powerful. You start dropping wisdom on folks, and next thing you know, you're giving TED Talks." He grinned. "Ain't nobody paying for that." As they wrapped up prep, the door opened and Terence, the young segment producer, nervous, always wearing mismatched socks, stepped in, tablet in hand. "Steve, so for today's third segment, we have the Harrison family versus the Jenkins family. Just a heads up, the Jenkins brought, a lot of energy." Steve raised an eyebrow. "More than me?" "Sir, they came in singing Destiny's Child, in harmony. Lord Jesus." Terence looked down at his tablet, then paused. "Also, there's a note here from the executive team." He tapped something, then hesitated. Steve turned to him. "Spit it out, son. I ain't got all day. I got 2 games to host, 3 jokes to write, and I got to beat Earthquake in spades after this taping." "Right, they said just to go with the flow after the second round. Something's coming, but it's a surprise." Steve frowned. "Surprise for who?" They wouldn't say. Just, don't walk off stage when it happens. "I swear, if this is another dancing gorilla stunt, I'm going to sue everybody." Terence stammered. No gorillas, I promise." Steve waved him off with a half laugh. "All right, go make sure them Jenkinses ain't rehearsing a full Super Bowl halftime show backstage." Terence nodded and disappeared like smoke. As Steve headed toward the set, he passed a familiar face. Lisa, a long-time camera operator who had worked on the show for nearly a decade. "Hey, Steve," she said. "You good today?" He paused. "You know what, Lisa? I think I am. Just feels like something's in the air." She smiled. "Maybe it's your time to get surprised instead of doing the surprising." Steve tilted his head. "You in on this too?" "Who, me?" she said innocently. Don't make me start interrogating folks." She laughed and pointed toward the stage. "Break a leg." He walked into the bright set of Family Feud like a seasoned general entering a battlefield he knew every inch of. Audience clapping, theme music blasting, lights bouncing off polished floors. It was showtime. The Jenkinses were already bouncing on their feet, dressed in matching maroon outfits and giving high fives like they were about to win The Voice. Across from them, the Harrisons stood calm and collected, the dad looking like he'd rather be at a barbecue, the mom already giving Steve, "I raised these kids' right eyes." Steve took his mark, flashed that megawatt smile, and launched into the familiar opening. "Welcome to Family Feud, everybody. I'm your man, Steve Harvey, and we got a good one for y'all today." Applause roared. "Over here we got the Jenkins family. Over there, the Harrisons. And one of these families going to win enough money to finally afford eggs again." The crowd laughed. Steve was on fire. The jokes landed, the crowd was vibing, the contestants were hilarious. One Harrison cousin accidentally guessed spaghetti to the question, "Name something you take on a camping trip," and Steve fell on the floor laughing for a good 2 minutes straight. By the time the second round wrapped, everyone in the room had tears in their eyes from laughter. Steve glanced at the clock. They were ahead of schedule. That's when the studio lights dimmed. The music stopped. Steve squinted toward the control booth. "Hey, you'll pay the electric bill?" Laughter. Then came the voice in his earpiece. It wasn't the usual director. It was the studio exec, Marlene, never one for small talk. "Steve, just stay where you are. We're rolling something special." Before he could respond, a massive screen descended from the ceiling. The crowd murmured. Steve took a step back. "You're pulling a prank? Is this a roast?" The screen lit up. And there he was, Keanu Reeves. Sitting on a modest couch in a sunlit room, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, his signature long hair tucked behind his ears. He looked peaceful. The room fell silent. Even Steve didn't have a joke. Keanu smiled gently, looked straight into the camera and said, "Hey, Steve, it's Keanu." The studio gasped. Steve's jaw dropped. "Man, I don't usually do things like this," Keanu continued, his voice calm and sincere, "but I had to take a minute to say something." Steve's heart thudded. The screen wasn't just playing a clip, this was a message for him, and everyone in the room could feel it. The morning sun cast a golden hue over Los Angeles as Steve Harvey's black SUV pulled into the bustling studio lot. Dressed in a tailored burgundy suit, complemented by his signature wide-brimmed hat, Steve exuded charisma and confidence. His assistant, Tammy, a sharp-witted woman in her early 40s, greeted him with a clipboard in hand. "Morning, Steve," Tammy said, handing him a cup of his favorite black coffee. "You've got a full day ahead. 3 Family Feud episodes, a quick podcast interview, and a wardrobe fitting for that GQ shoot." Steve took a sip, savoring the rich aroma. "Just another day in paradise," he quipped, flashing his trademark smile. Inside the studio, the crew was already in high gear. Cameras were being calibrated, lights adjusted, and the set buzzed with anticipation. Lisa, the lead camera operator, gave Steve a thumbs up as he walked by. "Looking sharp, Steve," she called out. "Always, Lisa. Gotta keep the audience entertained," he replied with a wink. In the makeup room, Dee, his longtime stylist, was waiting. A petite woman with an eye for fashion, Dee had been instrumental in Steve's recent style transformation, introducing him to bold colours and modern fits. Together with his stylist Ellie Caramo, they had turned Steve into an unexpected style icon, with his looks going viral online. "Sit down, honey," Dee said, patting the chair. "Let's get you camera ready." As Dee worked her magic, Steve glanced at his reflection. "You think the audience is ready for this level of handsomeness?" Dee chuckled. "They better be. You're serving looks today." Meanwhile, in the control room, Marlene, the show's executive producer, was in a hushed conversation with Terence, a young segment producer known for his meticulous attention to detail. "Is everything set for the surprise?" Marlene asked. Terence nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The video message is cued and the crew is briefed. Steve has no idea." "Good. Let's keep it that way." Back on set, the audience began to file in, their excitement palpable. The Jenkins family, a lively group from Atlanta, and the Harrisons, a reserved family from Chicago, took their places at the podiums. Steve greeted them with his usual flair, eliciting laughter and cheers. As the game progressed, the studio was filled with energy. Steve's quick wit and the contestants' humorous responses had everyone in stitches. But amidst the laughter, Steve couldn't shake a feeling of anticipation. After the second round, as the audience's applause subsided, the studio lights dimmed unexpectedly. A hush fell over the crowd. "Uh-oh," Steve said, looking around. Did we forget to pay the electric bill?" The audience chuckled, but before anyone could respond, a large screen descended from the ceiling. The screen lit up, revealing none other than Keanu Reeves, seated in a cozy room dressed casually, his demeanor calm and sincere. "Hey, Steve," Keanu began, his voice resonating through the studio. "I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to take a moment to share something with you." Steve's eyes widened in surprise, his usual composure momentarily faltering. The audience watched in silence, captivated by the unfolding moment. The room was silent. No laughter, no applause, not even a whisper. Everyone from the studio audience to the camera crew and stagehands stood frozen as the image of Keanu Reeves filled the giant screen above the family Feud set. Steve Harvey didn't move. He stared up, squinting slightly, as if trying to convince himself this wasn't some pre-recorded Hollywood gag. But the sincerity in Keanu's voice, the calm in his eyes, it was real. "Steve," Keanu said again, his voice calm but carrying weight, "I know this is out of the blue, and I hope I'm not interrupting a great episode, but I asked the team if I could steal a moment to talk to you directly." Steve blinked. His signature smile was gone now, replaced by quiet curiosity. Keanu looked down for a moment, then back at the camera. "I've been watching you for a long time, man. Not just on TV, not just on Family Feud or the Steve Harvey Show or your stand-up days, though those are legendary. I'm talking about the you that shows up in between the jokes, the man behind the mic." People in the audience began to shift in their seats, emotional already. The camera crew exchanged glances. This wasn't part of the script, but it was better than any storyline they could have imagined. Keanu continued, voice unwavering. "I've had my share of dark days. Most people know that. I've dealt with loss, with loneliness, with the kind of pain that makes you question everything. And during those times when it felt like the world was too loud or too heavy, I'd come across a clip of you, a speech, a joke, a story." Steve swallowed, eyes locked on the screen. "There was this one time, must have been 5 years ago. I was having a really rough week. I was flying back from Europe, and I was in this hotel room in London, jet-lagged and exhausted. I couldn't sleep. I turned on the TV and your talk show was playing. You were talking to a young man who was struggling, who felt like he wasn't enough. You told him, 'God didn't bring you this far to leave you. Trust the process. You matter.'" Keanu paused and gave a soft smile. "I don't think you know what that did for me. You were talking to him, but I felt like you were talking to me." Gasps and sniffles rippled through the crowd. Steve reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He didn't speak, didn't try to make a joke to cut the emotion. He just listened. "I've always admired your work ethic," Keanu went on, "but what I admire more is your heart. You give people hope. You show up for strangers every single day. You make us laugh, but more importantly, you make us feel seen." At that moment, the screen flickered, and a montage began to play. Clips of Steve over the years, hugging struggling contestants, giving motivational speeches, mentoring young men, helping families. Footage from backstage moments, some candid, some deeply emotional. "You don't just host a show," Keanu's voice narrated over the montage. "You create a space where people feel safe. You remind us that it's okay to be real, to be vulnerable, to cry one moment and laugh the next. That's rare, Steve. That's powerful." The final clip played, a recent moment where Steve had spoken to a teen contestant who had lost his mother. Steve had taken the boy aside and whispered something off camera. What he said was never aired, but now the clip included subtitles that revealed his words. "You're stronger than you know. Your mom's watching every move, and she's proud of you, right now." As the screen faded to black, Keanu appeared once more, seated in the same room. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, "for being light in a world that's often too dark. I hope this message lifts you the way you've lifted so many of us." Then, with the most Keanu Reeves-like sign-off possible, he gave a quiet nod and said, "Stay kind. Stay real. We need you, Steve." The screen went black. A long pause. The silence in the room was deeper than before. Not awkward, but sacred. Steve stood still, blinking slowly. Then he looked down, pressed the handkerchief to his face, and let out a breath that seemed to carry 40 years of weight. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual, rougher. I don't even know what to say." His lips quivered for a moment. That man, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to say all that, but he did. And he paused, gesturing to the audience. Y'all saw it. He meant it. The crowd gave a standing ovation, clapping, cheering, some even crying themselves. Steve wiped his eyes and took a few steps toward the front of the stage. People think this job is all jokes and cameras, but let me tell you, it ain't always easy. You get up here every day, put on a smile, crack a joke, hold folks up when they're falling, and sometimes you forget to check in on yourself. The audience nodded. Some mms echoed. He looked up at the control booth. "You'll set me up," he said with a half smile, "but I ain't even mad." Then he chuckled, still wiping away tears. "I just can't believe John Wick made me cry on live TV." The whole room erupted. And just like that, Steve Harvey brought everyone back, humor and heart woven together like only he could do. He took one more deep breath and looked toward the screen. "Thank you, Keanu," he said, his voice cracking. "That meant more than you'll ever know." Behind the scenes, Terence and Marlene stood side by side, both misty-eyed. "You were right," Terence whispered. "That was bigger than the show." Marlene nodded. "That was the soul of it." The studio was enveloped in a profound silence, the kind that follows a moment of unexpected vulnerability. Steve Harvey stood motionless, his hand clutching the crucifix around his neck, eyes glistening with unshed tears. The audience, usually lively and boisterous, sat in stunned silence, processing the heartfelt message from Keanu Reeves. Steve took a deep breath, attempting to steady himself. He looked out at the audience, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Y'all, I don't even know what to say," he began. That was something else." A gentle murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Steve continued, his voice gaining strength. "I've been on this stage countless times, made people laugh, shared stories, but this is different. To hear someone like Keanu Reeves, someone who's been through so much, say that my words helped him, it's humbling." He paused, wiping a tear from his cheek. "I've always believed that God uses us in ways we can't even imagine. Sometimes we just speak from the heart, not knowing who's listening or how it's impacting them." The audience nodded, many wiping away their own tears. Backstage, the crew watched the scene unfold on the monitors. Tammy, Steve's assistant, turned to Marlene, the executive producer. "Did you know about this?" she asked. Marlene shook her head, equally moved. "No idea, but it's one of the most genuine moments I've ever witnessed." On stage, Steve took a moment to compose himself. He looked directly into the camera, addressing Keanu. "Keanu, if you're watching this, thank you. Thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and for reminding all of us that our words and actions matter. You've touched my heart in a way I can't fully express." The audience erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. As the show resumed, the atmosphere remained charged with emotion. Contestants and audience members alike approached Steve during breaks, sharing their own stories of how his words had impacted their lives. One young woman, tears streaming down her face, said, "Steve, your advice helped me get through the loss of my father. I can't thank you enough." Steve embraced her, his own eyes welling up again. Later that evening, as the studio emptied and the lights dimmed, Steve sat alone on the stage, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about the unexpected connection with Keanu, the raw emotions, and the realization of the profound impact his words could have. He whispered a quiet prayer, thanking God for the opportunity to touch lives and for the reminder that even in the midst of entertainment, there is room for genuine human connection. The studio lights dimmed, signaling the end of another episode of Family Feud. Yet, the atmosphere was different. The emotional resonance from Keanu Reeves' heartfelt message lingered, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. Steve Harvey sat alone in his dressing room, the silence a stark contrast to the usual post-show bustle. He stared at his reflection, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his shoulders. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Steve called out. Tammy, his assistant, entered, holding a tablet. "Steve, you need to see this." She handed him the device, displaying a flood of messages from fans worldwide. Tweets, emails, and videos poured in, all expressing gratitude and sharing personal stories of how Steve's words had impacted their lives. One message stood out. "Mr. Harvey, your words saved me during my darkest times. Thank you for being a beacon of hope." Steve's eyes welled up again. "I never realized the extent of my reach," he murmured. Tammy smiled. "You've always been more than a host, Steve. You're a source of inspiration." The next morning, Steve arrived at the studio with renewed purpose. He gathered his team for a meeting. "I want to do more," he began. "Beyond the laughs and the games, I want to make a tangible difference." The team listened intently as Steve outlined his vision, a new segment on Family Feud, dedicated to sharing uplifting stories, highlighting everyday heroes, and offering support to those in need. The idea was met with enthusiasm. The team brainstormed, planning the logistics and content for the new segment. Weeks later, the first episode featuring the new segment aired. It showcased a single mother who had overcome adversity to provide for her children. Steve surprised her with a scholarship fund for her kids and a new car to ease her daily commute. The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears. The segment quickly became a fan favorite, resonating with viewers and reinforcing the show's commitment to making a difference. Steve's initiative extended beyond the show. He partnered with various organizations to support education, mentorship, and community development programs. His foundation expanded its reach, impacting countless lives. One evening, Steve received a letter from Keanu Reeves. "Dear Steve, your response to my message touched me deeply. Witnessing the positive changes you've initiated is truly inspiring. It's a testament to the power of authenticity and compassion. Thank you for being a light in the world. Warm regards, Keanu." Steve smiled, reflecting on the journey that had unfolded from a single heartfelt message. He realized that true success wasn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the lives one touched and the legacy one left behind. As the sun set, casting a golden hue over the city, Steve stood by his window, filled with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that with heart and humility he could make a lasting impact.